I want to talk about a really delicate thing to talk about and an almost impossible thing for a man to talk about without offending people. But I really do think it's worth trying. There are two really common ways that we unintentionally dismiss the people that we love. And most of the time, we don't even realize that we're doing it. First, when an event occurs, when someone says or does something, the very first thing that we do is to assign a meaning to that event. We interpret everything that happens to us. And all too often, in an effort to understand or deal with situations, we explain or label people's emotions before we validate them. And two, we judge people's emotional reactions through the lens of how we think that they should be reacting. I experienced both of these things personally recently, and I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience with them. Because when we don't understand this dynamic, we end up disconnecting at the exact moment when someone most needs connection. When we focus first on why we think someone is emotional, before validating what they're feeling, we risk making them feel dismissed. That means that even if the emotion makes sense to us, oh, it's just your hormones, or you've been under a lot of stress lately, or you didn't sleep very well last night, right? The person on the receiving end of that often feels like they're being analyzed instead of being heard and understood. And this shows up all the time, especially with women who are often told things like, it's probably just PMS, or you're overreacting, you're being super sensitive today, are you okay? All too often, the message that they end up hearing is, your emotion isn't real or valid, it's just hormones. It's super important to understand that hormones don't create emotions. They amplify what already is there. They take 2s and turn them into 6s, and they take 6s and turn them into 9s. So yes, and this won't be a big shocker to anybody, you might be more sensitive or more reactive during certain hormonal fluctuations. But that doesn't mean that your emotions don't matter. And when someone immediately shifts the conversation to why you're feeling something, it derails the actual thing that you're trying to express. And it feels really yucky. Believe it or not, I experienced this firsthand not long ago. And no, I wasn't experiencing premenstrual syndrome. And since I can't experience that, lots of people think that I have no business talking about this at all. But I did experience how yucky it can feel to have your feelings glanced over in the attempt to understand why you're behaving differently than you normally do. October is a really hard month for me. The 14th is the day that we lost our son. And just last year, my dad passed away on the 15th. So every year, the last few weeks of September and the start of October feel super heavy to me. I get more easily irritated. I snap more than usual, which isn't like me at all. I don't like conflict or negative emotion, and I usually try to avoid both of those things at all costs if I can. I try really hard to be upbeat and fun-loving. I really don't get mad very easily or very often. It's just not how my brain works. So when I was getting upset during that stretch of time, instead of someone saying, yeah, that makes total sense, the response that I felt like I kept getting was, what's going on with you? And the conversation shifted to being focused on me being different, not about what I was actually feeling, which made me feel like the problem instead of somebody just going through a hard time. Here's the second idea that I want to kind of tie into this. We all have covert expectations of each other based on our temperament and personality. Even if we don't realize that we have those expectations, we expect certain people to be emotional and others to stay even. We give some people more grace to have a moment while we judge others when they do. And that double standard is usually based on how we've seen them show up in the past. And what I want to point out is that our subconscious or covert expectations are largely based on their temperament. I'll give you an example. My wife is wired for intensity. When she's upset, she's quick, she's direct, and she's passionate. The people around her have kind of learned that it's just how she is. So her strong reactions don't feel like that big of a deal to them. As a result, her strong reactions don't feel like that big of a deal to our kids, to the people around her. On the other hand, I'm usually pretty positive and pretty light, and most of the time I'm choosing to avoid things unless I feel like they really need to be addressed. So when I do get upset, it's rare and everyone notices. And they don't notice in a good way. They tend to react like, whoa, Dad's mad, what's wrong with him? But the fact is that during those few weeks that I was struggling, nothing was overly wrong. My ability to cope well with little things was compromised because I was struggling with my grief. And that right there is the problem that I want you to be aware of. When someone acts outside of their usual emotional pattern, we automatically try to figure out why they aren't acting like they normally do. And we assume that something must be going on. And that assumption makes it really hard for people to feel safe expressing how they feel. Do you remember the temperament piece that I mentioned before? The wiring? It's actually part of a temperament framework called C.O.R.E. I'm an O in the C.O.R.E model, an idealist, and I live for connection, for positivity, and for lightness. My wife is an R. She's a doer. She's driven by action and resolution and intensity. Our temperaments shape how we show up emotionally and also how others expect us to show up. And if we're not aware of those dynamics, we end up assigning meaning to other people's reactions that have nothing to do with the real issue. We tend to decide if somebody's being too much or maybe not being enough based on how far their behavior is from what we've come to expect from them. So here's what I hope you take away from this. First, we all want to feel validated, and when we don't, regardless of the reason, our brains double down, trying to feel seen and understood. Emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. They're data. And here's a super important point. You can listen to somebody to validate them, to care about how somebody feels, without agreeing or condoning their point of view at all. So don't rush to explain or analyze before you validate. The second point I want to make is to pay attention to the unspoken emotional rules that you've assigned to the people around you. There's a really good chance that your expectations might not be super fair, or they might be expectations that the other person never agreed to. So if you want a better way to understand your own wiring and how to work with, not against you, and the people that you love, check out the free C.O.R.E assessment at whatsmycore.com. It'll help you understand how you're built so you can stop dismissing yourself and the people that you love. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you've benefited from this. Subscribe to learn more about your temperament and how to have healthy relationships in your life.